Good afternoon and thank you for coming. My name is Constable Phil Gavin. I'm one of the media relations personnel here with the Niagara Regional Police Service. As you're aware from the media advisory that went out earlier today, this news conference will address today's developments involving the Ontario Provincial Police as they relate to the officer-involved shooting that occurred in Pelham on November 29, 2018. Following the Chief's statement, there will be a brief question period. During the question period, we would ask you to identify yourself, your respective agency prior to your question. We will also have a microphone available for anyone's questions. That way people viewing at home can hear your question. Could everyone please ensure your cell phone is on silent or vibrate? I would now like to bring forward Chief Brian McCullough from Niagara Regional Police.
Thanks very much, Phil. Good afternoon. This morning at approximately 9:40 a.m., the Ontario Provincial Police arrested and charged one of our officers, Constable Nathan Parker, who was involved in an incident that occurred in Pelham on November 29th of 2018. Immediately following that incident, once it was determined that the Ontario Special Investigations Unit was invoking its mandate, I requested the assistance of the Ontario Provincial Police to determine if there was any criminal culpability outside of the SIU's scope. I felt it was imperative as we continue to maintain a high level of public trust and confidence from the community, and only fair to our members to bring in the OPP as an impartial third party to conduct that investigation. As it was the OPP's investigation, I can only speak at a very high level in terms of the most recent developments in regards to the charges laid today against Constable Nathan Parker. What I do need to be clear on is that the impact that this event has had on our service and on our members, and it's been profound. We are all still coming to terms with understanding what transpired that day. Through it all, we have continued to see and truly appreciate the support of the community we so proudly serve. My members are dedicated day in and day out to serving and protecting the entire community of Niagara and making it a better and safer place to live. I can assure you that the public trust that we are so privileged to receive from our community cannot and is not taken for granted. This is not over. Not for our members, not for the community, and not for the officers or their families. Throughout this entire process, I cannot stress enough the pride that I have in my members, both sworn and civilian, who have continued to demonstrate the utmost professionalism and compassion, and who will continue to do so. I have to reiterate, since these matters are now before the courts, it would be inappropriate for me to comment further on the charges so as to not jeopardize the judicial process. However, at this time, I would welcome any questions that you may have, and I'll do my best to answer. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chief Grant LaFlèche from the Standard. Just a couple questions to start with, just about your decision to request the OPP investigate after the SIU had invoked their mandate. We know that the previous officer who was charged after the SIU investigation, Sergeant Donovan, faces a number of charges that they laid. What was it about the incident itself that you felt you needed a second set of eyes, in this case the OPP, and what was it about that incident that you felt required another police service that could lay charges or do an investigation outside the scope of the SIU? I'm just wondering if you can parse that out a little bit in some detail.
Sure. So first of all, the fact that there's another investigation going on outside of the SIU investigation is not abnormal. In fact, we would normally carry on that investigation ourselves. But in this case, because it was two of our members, I felt that it was most appropriate and provided an unbiased and impartial investigation to have that done by an outside agency. And in terms of the scope of the investigation, The SIU's mandate kicks in when there is serious injury caused to an individual as a result of the actions of a police officer. In this case, Constable Nathan Parker had sustained serious injury, so the mandate had been met for the SIU. And the purpose of calling in the OPP was to have them investigate any criminal culpability that may have come outside of the scope of the SIU mandate.
So just so I'm clear, and I guess our readers are clear, when the SIU is investigating, you have an officer who, in this case, had been injured, another officer who would have been the subject of that investigation. The SIU's mandate would have looked kind of strictly at that. So you have an injured person, you have an officer who's the subject of that investigation. If charges are, I'm speaking generally now, if charges are to be laid, it would be against that subject officer, and nothing really outside of that falls within their mandate, hence why other than Niagara Regional Police, the OPP would have clearance to do a further investigation.
That's correct.
Are you able to say, Chief, one of the charges, and you may not be able to, but one of the charges that were laid today was a resist arrest charge. Do we know, or can you say what Mr. Parker, Constable Parker, was going to be arrested for that day?
So unfortunately, Grant, I'm not privy to the evidence that the OPP is relying upon to lay that charge.
And the other question I wanted to ask, Chief, is in both cases, the bail hearings for the officers who have been charged in this case, their hearings are quite some time away from when they're arrested. They're not being held in a detention center, for instance. In most other cases, somebody who was facing a serious assault charge or an attempt murder charge would find themselves at the detention center while they're waiting for their hearings. Can you explain, and again, maybe in a high level, why that is not the case with these officers? Is it because they're police officers and so therefore they can't be placed in the detention center for their own safety? I just think people are trying to understand why in this case it's different than in most other cases when these sorts of charges are laid.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't provide any or offer any opinion on that as to why, in the case of the SIU or in the case of the OPP, as to the mechanism for their release.
And then finally, can you speak at all about, I mean, you mentioned it in your address, the impact this has had on the rest of the service, and as you say, this is not over yet for some time. What steps have been taken internally to sort of deal with the ramifications of that or the ripple effects of that on your members, as you know, both they dealt with it back in the early winter and then now as charges are being laid, and I presume as we move forward and the court cases proceed?
Yeah, you're quite right, and this is not over, and it won't be over anytime soon. And unfortunately, the impact has been quite significant for our members. We have a member support unit, and we have encouraged our members, anyone that's experiencing any difficulty as a result of the circumstances surrounding this event, both at the time and you know, subsequent, to reach out. We've really tried to promote an environment where it's all right to ask for assistance. So we're encouraging members to reach out to our member support unit. We have a chaplain unit as well, and so they're also a great resource for us, and certainly we would encourage our members to do that. You're welcome.
If there is no more questions, then that will conclude today's press event. Thank you for coming.